Hey guys, this is Comic Uno, and today I'm doing Comic Uno's Best Comics of the Week, and this is a show where I review all the comics I've read this week in one show. We go least favorite to best pick of the week and everything in between, and before I get started, we do talk about the viewer's pick of the week at the end of the episode, so in the comments below, let me know your favorite book so you have a chance to be featured on the episode. Let's get started. Another very big haul for the week, and we have 16 comics, and number 16 for me is The Amazing Spider-Man issue 58, which is part of our topic here. The reason it's here is because it was promoted as this big issue. It's going to be really emotional. It's going to change the course of the series. And there's very few words in this issue, honestly. It's about Tombstone and Beetle, father-daughter relationship. And Tombstone's upset with everything that Janice has done throughout this gang war, and Spider-Man's kind of in the mix of it. Spider-Man's hardly even really an element here, besides that he is there for the action, and there's not a lot of emotional standpoints between Janice and Tombstone. It's just them fighting each other, and I'm not a huge fan of John Romita Jr.'s artwork, so having that on there as well, I just felt like didn't really work for the emotions, and there's just not much of a story. If you play with the little thread of Janice and Tombstone, they've been trying to build it up, but that emotional weight is just not there because there's just not many conversations about that, unlike maybe a series I'm going to talk about later that I think really has a lot of theme and character work. And honestly, obviously, what we do know about Ultimate Spider-Man, yes, the series I'll be talking about later, is, you know, it has elements of things that Spider-Man fans want to see. But even past that, I have a lot of thoughts about why that is more successful as a series than Amazing Spider-Man. But we'll get there. Now we're moving to number 15, which is Daredevil, Woman Without Fear, issue 3. We are heading to the end of this book to relaunch to another book, which is a Red Band series. I feel like it's kind of lost its weight because of that. It was supposed to be an ongoing giant story with Elektra to be able to continue her character arc, and for the most part, she just kind of repeats a lot of the same things about her not being able to kill anymore. And I just feel like there could be a little bit more to this series. I think it's honestly was a little bit more interesting with the Punisher, and he really only shows up in the end. She's trying to save this girl who, again, is not the most interesting character. And I feel like the artwork for something that is so actiony just wasn't very strong here. So overall, giving that one 2 stars, and that is number 15. Moving on to number 14, which is Rog Sun issue 22. I like Rog Sun the most when it balances the family drama and the school drama with this more mythical side of their story. I'm not as into the mythos, and that was more of the driving force in this issue. Even though I think the artwork, they have a different artist for this series, which tends not to happen in creator-owned series, but I thought this was honestly a step up from the previous art that we've been getting from the series. I really like the facial expressions here, but I want more from our main characters, and I feel like they just keep introducing all these other characters. I'm like, I just want to focus and learn more about Marcus and the rest of the gang. So overall, giving that one 2.5 stars, and that is number 14. Moving on to number 13, which is Kill All Immortals, issue 3. This issue was a little bit of a step down from issue 2. I thought issue 2 had a really good ramp up to this big action sequence between Thor and Freya. This one, I felt like the brother dynamic wasn't as interesting as the Thor one, and I don't think it really got very interesting until the end and very different until the end where they like find the spaceship. But for the most part, it's like, okay, family's fighting, family fights, they find spaceship. So I'm like, all right, I think the next issue is going to be a bit stronger than this one, but overall still enjoying the series and want to see where it ends up going, and I like the grittiness of the artwork. So giving that 2.5 stars, and that is number 13. And moving on to number 12, which is NYX issue 3. A series I've been keeping on my pull list because I like Miss Marvel. This is the only place we could see Miss Marvel. I like X-23. But I think a big problem with this series is that they just so happen to be characters in the same room, but you don't really know why they should be together. There's not a lot of chemistry between characters, and I felt that a lot. I felt a lot of leftovers or Krakoa in this issue as well, which I'm not a huge fan of, so when they dug into that, I was like, okay, that's not the X-Men side stuff I like the most. The most interesting thing probably was the cousin of Kamala coming and saying, oh, who are you hanging out with, these mutants, what's going on, and having this angle of and viewpoint of mutants, and that being her family, I thought was pretty interesting. I also think the artwork is pretty solid for this book too, very clean, but I want to like this series more than I do, and it's on the fence of if I'm going to keep it more or not. So giving that one 2.5 stars, and that is number 12. Moving on to number 11, which is Action Comics issue 1069. I like the secondary story a lot more than the first story. The first story is just this lost episode of Superman that I think the artwork was good, but for the most part doesn't really change anything for Superman. I don't think I learned more about the character. There wasn't any character interactions that really riled me up. That one for me just wasn't as strong, even though I like the darker palette artwork. But the secondary story I really liked because it had to do with the relationship of Lois and Clark. This interesting ethical conundrum of Clark being Superman and what that means for them as both journalists and as a married couple. And I thought the artwork was really clean, and it was really just a conversation between the two of them that I felt like really worked, and I think added elements to their relationship and to the future of the Superman story. So overall, getting that 3 stars, mostly because I really liked the secondary story. Moving on to number 10, which is Lilo and Stitch, issue 5. This one is an interesting issue because it falls into this pattern of Stitch and Lilo are not allowed to hang out with each other, it feels like. They don't really go on adventures with each other. There's always a reason for a wedge and for them to be separated. But when they are separated, I like the people they hang out with. So Lilo gets to hang out with the galactic people and has this story of this dinosaur creature being a monster, no one wanting him, and then she brings them home. Her sister is along the way for that. So I thought that was fun. And then seeing her sister's boyfriend and Stitch hang out with each other, and Stitch kind of have this conundrum of being a ruckus and feeling left out because of it, and not knowing if he's a good person because of it. So I think there was a lot of interesting character moments. I just wish that Lilo and Stitch were allowed to hang out with each other. So overall, giving that one 3 stars, and that is I believe that was number 10. Moving on to number 9, which is Power Rangers and Usagi issue 1. I think for people who like both these franchises, this will be a lot higher. I actually thought there was a lot of fun elements, but I just don't know anything about Usagi, so when you got into it, I was like, oh, this is fun, but I don't have that emotional weight. But I do think this book did a good job at explaining who he is and his world, as the Power Rangers do jump into Japan, and actually seeing that through their suits and through their Zords as well. So I thought that was cool, and I enjoyed the team up, but again, I just think it would have been stronger if I knew both series, and I thought the artwork was a lot of fun too. It's cool to see more of a chibi style for the Power Rangers and a different type of style for the Power Rangers in general. So giving that one 3 stars, and that is number 9. Moving on to number 8, which is the Titans issue 15. Going back to, if you're a huge Raven fan, I think you'll love this issue. It's her fighting back. We get to see her white costume again. As a Titans fan, I liked it. I think the Garth and Raven scene kind of goes on for too long and it feels a little convenient. But I do like Raven fighting back. I did like the artwork a lot here. And I just like the Titans finally being a team again, as we, I believe, getting to a new creative team for that next issue and All In as a whole. I don't know if this felt like a big wrap up to this run for Tom Taylor. I do think that was leaning more towards what we're going to see with Nightwing. But overall, I've had a fun enough time with this series. So giving that 3 stars, and that is number 8. I gave that 3.5 stars, and that was number 8, because the artwork was very solid. Moving on to number 7, which is Green Arrow issue 16. Honestly, I thought it was going to go one direction and then it goes another, which is why this is higher. We get to see Green Arrow's betraying his family, and usually this goes one direction. Usually it's like, okay, I am betraying you guys, but really I'm just a mole. And they don't go that direction. Green Arrow really is betraying them, and maybe he is doing it for a reason, but we still don't know what that reason is. It looks like the next issue, the final issue of Joshua Williamson, we are going to get that revealed. But I like the way they gave us information, even though Oliver is still able to team up and talk to his family throughout. Thought the artwork was really solid for this one, and it was a very strong tie-in to Absolute Power, where I feel like some of the tie-ins have been a little bit flip-floppier with that. So overall, giving that one 3.5 stars, and that is number 7. Moving on to number 6, which is Uncanny X-Men issue 3. I love the vibe of this book. It feels like a very classic X-Men series where you get to jump into some of these character stories. Obviously with these newer mutants, which honestly does have a feel of the actual New Mutants and how they join the X-Men, and then the older mutants like Rogue and Gambit and Wolverine dealing with their own situations as well. I do think the plot's a little slower at times, but again, I just love the old school vibe of this book, and I like learning about these new characters, because a lot of times new characters are just kind of thrown in your face and you're like, why should I care? And I feel like this book is setting up moments to show you why you should care, with some great artwork by Dave Marquez. So overall, giving that one 3.5 stars, and that is number 6. Moving on to number 5, which is Absolute Power Origins issue 3. This has honestly been probably the biggest surprise from Absolute Power. It's obviously, is any tie-in necessary? Probably not, but what a tie-in should do is make that story more informative when you do read it and feel like it has more layers. And I feel like that is exactly what this series is doing, where you find out why Amanda Waller is doing everything she's doing. It's a very interesting origin story of how she pushes her family away and how she feels power. And there's a moment where she's actually even a little shy from it, where Batman's right in front of her and she's scared of him. He's like, oh, why did you allow this to happen? And there's a lot of interesting moments like that that really makes this tie-in feel necessary in some ways if you want the full story to be enjoyed. And I just liked I just enjoyed seeing more from Amanda Waller and seeing a side that you normally don't. You really just see her as Amanda Waller with a capital A, and I think we get the lowercase Amanda Waller here, and just kind of peel back the curtain a little bit. And the artwork is really solid for this one as well. So giving that 4 stars, and that is number 5. Moving on to number 4, which is Saga issue 69. Of course, we get the 69 cover, but no 69ing in the actual comic book. Honestly, this is more of an emotional issue where we get to see the family being isolated from each other. And there's Brian K. Vaughan just does a beautiful job at explaining humanity to people. And I enjoy those moments where we get to see Elena just explain her relationship with Squire and how she grew that connection with her son, and then also seeing Hazel talk about what it's like to have a friend, and yeah, her friend kind of challenges her, but that's what friends should be. And you kind of weave this all together to tell a bigger story of this family's kind of shattering apart and where they are mentally. So I liked it as a really interpersonal issue. It doesn't move the plot tremendously until the end, which is more about the assassins, and there's only little moments that really progress the plot, where we get to see this person who might betray Elena and try to maybe showcase who she is. So I like those moments, but they were a little quieter here. So giving that 4 stars, and that is number 4. Moving on to number 3, which is Zatanna Bring Down the House issue 5. I believe this is the penultimate issue. And I gotta say, I'm usually not a huge Constantine fan, but I really like this issue and Constantine in it. I think he was a really good vehicle to get Zatanna to the place she needed to be as a magic wielder, and learning more about Zatara and what happened to him. And I also enjoyed seeing their romance. I'm not really a shipper of those two, but I think they really worked here. Pull back the curtain to see why they work and their chemistry. And I just think it worked really well here. As Zatanna, again, is just learning more about this world, kind of getting straight to the point of Zatara being, that is the big plot we're going to get to, and we are going to get, hopefully, that final battle in this last issue. And also the artwork is just tremendous. I love the colors. It's so poppy. I love how the flashbacks and how distinct they are from what's currently going on with these darker moments. We even get to see Paris in this issue. So a really, really well done issue. So giving that one 4.5 stars, and that is number 3. Moving on to number 2, which is the topic of the video, and that is Ultimate Spider-Man issue 9. Why is this better than Amazing Spider-Man? For all the reasons I was talking about with Amazing Spider-Man earlier, I feel like it's a book that just doesn't dig deeper into the characters and the themes. But this issue, honestly, is one of my favorites in a while because of how much it digs deeper into the themes. I love the newspaper talk. I love the idea of these two, J. Jonah Jameson and Ben, trying to build this newspaper, actually succeeding in it, but saying these are not the stories we want to talk about. I don't want to talk about Spider-Man all the time. And having to decide, is it okay to do these Spider-Man stories while trying to tell this bigger story about the Ultimate Universe and Stark and things that are bleeding into the Ultimate Universe as a whole. And then the middle, I think there's a part with Black Cat that slows down a little bit, but then you're like, oh, there's a male Black Cat. That's kind of interesting. That's different. And then you get to the end where I really enjoy the conversation between Green Goblin and Spider-Man. And guess what? There's not that much action in this issue. Again, there's a middle action part, but it's mostly just emotion, character pieces, where Green Goblin is ready to kill. He's cool with it, and Peter isn't. And it's like, can their friendship last that? Are they gonna totally have a wedge? At this point, they're not, but Peter saw someone die, and does that change Peter as a hero from Amazing Spider-Man? Will he become okay with it? Will he become a darker hero? And there's a lot of interesting character questions that work because it's an Ultimate Universe, but also just at the core of Spider-Man. You know, with great power comes great responsibility. That's being challenged. And then the idea of like Spider-Man's a menace headlines being challenged and just being modernized. So I just feel like even though this didn't have the most action, it works as a character piece, which is why I feel like Ultimate Spider-Man has been successful outside the point that MJ is in it and they're together. I think the storytelling's a little bit stronger in that regard. And also the artwork is a bit stronger here as well. So giving that one 4.5 stars, and that is my second pick. Moving on to number 1. I had to pick up the Barbarian cover, and that is Feral issue 6. I've never read a zombie book that has actually gone to ahead of the zombie, which is why this was my number 1 pick. This issue is about Patches being feral. Then you also get this pass about their story of with their relationship with the family, and maybe it not being a great relationship, and them not loving each other as a family and as cats. And I like obviously the little perspectives of, oh, you bring another animal into the house, you know, we all like they're gonna be best friends, and sometimes they're not. And I like that side of the story, the relatability. But then there's the horror element, that the zombie element, where we've seen that a billion times, but how do you do that differently? How do you make that emotional? And I just thought this was a very emotional issue, a very visually interesting issue, as we're literally in the cat's point of view, and a really unique book of a story you've kind of seen a billion times. So giving that one 4.5 stars, that is my pick of the week. Hopefully you guys enjoyed. This is Comic Uno. Let me know in the comments below what your favorite book of the week was, and the viewer's pick of the week was The Moon is Following Us, and here are some comments about that. Hopefully you guys enjoyed. This is Comic Uno, and I'll see you guys in the next one.